Today's guest is Lisa Bader, and Lisa has a very interesting business. She has a gift giving business, and the backstory about how she got into this is really sweet, and you'll relate to your childhood when you hear what she talks about. And it was such a great story that made me realize that a lot of us do have things from our childhood that were whispers from the universe, but we were so young we didn't even realize it. And if we just think about back, if we get out of the busyness of our mind and we think back to the things that we loved as a child and the things that we did when we were a child that lit us up, that might be something that will lead you into a more lit up future and a business potentially. But we also talk about some things that as she was transitioning, because she was in a corporate job for most of her life, and as she was starting to get to the point where, well, she went through a health crisis, number one. So we talk about how that could have been a big hit on the head from the universe. We talk about how a podcast that she listened to really led her on a trip that turned into a book that turned into potentially what she's doing today. But it was when she started listening to these whispers from the universe, and she didn't even realize until this interview that that's what that was. But that is what it was, and I hope that by listening to her story, that if you're not listening to whispers, that you start paying attention. You start paying attention to what is coming from a soul deep knowing, and that you stop really letting that ego drive you. And her very final words are super powerful. So I hope you stay to the end and listen to those. So, actually, one of my favorite episodes with how we go deep into what the universe is nudging us towards. So, let's listen to Lisa's story now. Welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Lives. And today, my guest is Lisa Bader. And Lisa Bader has a super interesting business. I was so excited to have her on and talk about something that I haven't talked about before. I love how entrepreneurs can decide to do whatever they want to do. And her business is very unique because she is all about celebration and birthdays, holidays. She has a website called Birthday Butler, and she's going to talk about how, because she came from the corporate world like me, and this podcast is about midlife transformations, and she's a perfect example of really doing a 180 and doing something completely different. But Lisa, she was from a very young child taught to really love celebrations, and I can't wait for her to share that story with you, because if you're out there listening and there's something from your childhood that really made a difference in your life, perhaps that's something you could turn into a business like Lisa did. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Lisa and let her tell her story from her version of her story. So welcome to the podcast, Lisa.
Thank you, Lori. I'm so excited to be here. And you talked about celebrations. And I grew up in New Jersey, and my mom was and still is a single parent and worked as a waitress. And my dad left when we were 4, and times were really tough. My mom worked in a smoky diner from 6 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. And there were constant financial struggles and how the car wouldn't work. And what I remember most about my childhood, though, was how special my mom made birthdays and holidays. And so amidst all the trials and tribulations, there were these really, really happy, bright moments where birthdays and celebrations, it was like you were queen for a day. And
do you remember that show?
was
Do you remember the Queen for a Day show?
No, I
Oh
don't.
my gosh, there was a show, and maybe it's just because I'm a little bit older than you, but there was a show and they would bring these people on and they would win. I can't even remember what the competition was,
Yeah.
but I think it was maybe they'd tell their stories and then people
Uh-huh.
would vote
It's kind of like, I guess, the reality show of the old, 60s. And
Uh-huh.
they would be and the queen for the day, and they'd win like a washer and dryer, or usually some household appliance.
Oh.
But so it's really a thing.
It is? Wow. That sounds, I'd like to be queen for a day myself. Well, it was something that, fast forward as it was time to go to college. One, as great as birthdays and celebrations were, the realities of seeing how hard my mom worked at hoping for good tips. And I knew that financial stability was critical for me. And so I did what a lot of us do. I went to college so I could get a good job, so I could go to grad school and get a better job. And for me, creating a life that had financial security, I had a big corporate job. I worked at Intel and Procter and Gamble, and
Can
I
I
did that.
interrupt for a second? I want to ask you a question. Did you ever hear your mom say, I want more for you, or I want you to have more financial security? Because my mother told me that the job that I wanted to do as a social worker, that was like what came to me when I was in college and I was trying to figure out my degree. And she said, you'll never make money doing that. And so that kind of stuck with me. And I'm just curious if that came from your mom or just because a desire from you because you saw your mom struggle.
It was both. It definitely was both. And, she would say, I'm the older one. My sister's 3.5 years younger than I am. And she would say, girls, you don't ever want to have to work like I do. You don't. And she would come in the door and she wore her uniform was black polyester pants and a black vest and a white blouse that had to be ironed. And she would come in the door and you could smell the diner food. You could smell the French fries. She would soak her feet
And probably
because
the smoke.
it was, and girls, you have to do better than this. And it was always very much, and it was also thinking maybe I had to take care of her financially at some point. And
Mm.
so the fact that I had done well academically, I loved school, that I was fortunate. And though she didn't wasn't able to, I remember applying to college and I don't know anything about that, right? Because that she genuinely didn't. But while she didn't know about academic things, she always made me feel like I was the most loved girl in the world and I was the most special thing. And so as it came time to go out into the corporate world and becoming an adult, though she she never understood what I did in my corporate job at all. And she just knew I went to a lot of meetings and I did branding and marketing and operations, and I would tell her different stories that didn't mean anything to her. But at the same time, she was so unbelievably proud of me.
I bet.
And
Yes.
that, while I don't think I realized how tremendously proud you can feel of a child until I became a mother. And that love you feel when your kids excel is, priceless. And so for me, corporate America was amazing. I got to do exciting things, worked with tremendous people, and I was really good at climbing the corporate ladder. I like a good goal, and I'd climb and go up and up,
And get
and
rewarded for it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that was pretty heady. And at the time, I had worked for Intel, and it was high tech, and it was crazy. Like, it was exciting. And at the time, my husband also worked for Intel. We were a dual career couple. We had small children. And when you start getting those little nagging thoughts like, this assignment isn't quite as exciting as the last one.
Yeah. And
Or
for me, the higher I got, the more unhappy or less fulfilled I would say. Did you find that? It was like I kept getting more generic and less close connections with the people that I really wanted to impact.
Yeah, for me, I don't know it was so much that as Intel, when I loved it most, there was lots of change and newness, and I got to launch products in new countries and travel around the world. And that was heady and amazing. And you really believed you were, this was several years ago, obviously, but we were connecting the world to the internet. And it was amazing. But what was happening is that when the tech bubble burst, mortgage crisis, and suddenly the company wasn't growing quite as fast as it had been.
Or
And
innovating.
so, it was, assignments started changing quite a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was, you had to continue with the same job longer than ever before. And that was a
What's
big
interesting?
change.
So there's such a parallel here with me is that I would get so bored after a year of doing the same thing. I would either leave the company or raise to another level. And I think what that is this desire to innovate inside and create. And as an entrepreneur, what do you get to do? You get to create whatever you want. And you're kind of always in this creation mode of like making it better and innovating new ways of doing things. So I can totally relate to that.
And you kind of start weighing, the pros and the cons. And we've since split, but my then husband and I, Sunday nights, we'd sit with our calendars, and our rule was we always had one person had to be home at night with the kids. So we couldn't travel at the same time. And we had an amazing nanny, but the kids started getting older, more activities, and it would be this crazy scheduling. And so little by little, the corporate job became less wow. Homefront became more demanding. And then, I don't know if you've had any health issues, but you start, you notice maybe you're more tired in the morning. And, oh, well, I stayed up late. And weeks and months go by, and slowly you're kind of gathering, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. But, you're a working mom, you just plow forward. And for me, it got to the point where my health issues took center stage, and I got to the point where I could no longer get out of bed in the morning. And
yeah, I had chronic fatigue syndrome when it was actually early on in my career. I was in my late 20s. But what's interesting that you point this out, because I know that the energy that we bring, a lot of if it's negative energy, then it can what's the word, impact your physical body. It can manifest itself as physical problems and health issues. And it's so funny because since you mentioned that, it was right about the same time that my marriage was not doing very well. And I asked my husband for a divorce. And fortunately, we were able to rein it in and go get counseling. So I'm interested because it sounds like that with you, there was this dissatisfaction with your job. There was this dissatisfaction with your marriage. And that was probably, a lot of it was internalized and was contributing to the problems that you had. It's just so funny because I know this, and I help my students understand this. In fact, one of them, she has so many back problems, and I recommended a book to her about this very issue. And it just now dawned on me that that happened to me. I always thought, I had chronic fatigue syndrome, but it was at the same time I was going through these marital issues. So, and struggling, probably not real happy in my job either at the time. So yeah. So you had these health issues. What did you do to get over them?
Oh my goodness. What didn't I try? I had so many autoimmune issues, and
that's a big one. That's coming from,
it's
disconnectedness. Yeah.
What I always said is I did not have cancer, and I don't know what that's like, but it's a clear diagnosis and you know how to fight that. And when, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Mark Hyman, but he gives this great analogy of, it's kind of like when you're driving and your tire on your car breaks, you need to fix the tire. But if you're driving and your car just doesn't feel right, what do you say you want fixed? It's just not doing what it needs to. And for me, that's how my body felt. It was little by little, and I ended up finding amazing doctors, integrative physicians who, piece by piece, kind of figured out what wasn't working. I had lots of thyroid issues, iron issues, on it went. But it was a year in bed where that future it was bleak. And it's a scary time. And my daughter at the time was 7 and came in from school and threw open the doors to the bedroom, and she said, "Hi, sweetie, how are you?" And I would always, even though I'd been in bed all day for, now months and months and months, I would always, my little bit of energy was saved for my kids. So when they came home, that I could be present. And, "Hi, sweetie, how are you?" And she said, "Are you going to die today?" And no, sweetie, mommy's not dying today. I said, "Why?" She said, "Well, you sleep all the time, so it's like you're dead." And for me, that was heartbreaking, because while I was trying to fight my health issues as much as I could to this child who I love more than anything in the world, that for me was more powerful than I think a zillion test results, a zillion corporate ladders. And so it was then I vowed that as I wasn't sure if I would get better, and obviously and thankfully I did, I wanted, knowing how uncertain the future was, I wanted to make sure I spent the time I had left doing things that my kids could see, that my kids, if I weren't here, what things would I want to give to my children? And I mentioned how my mom always made me feel so loved. Gosh, if I had 2 months, 2 years, 20 years, I wanted my kids to know that, to feel it. And so as my health started improving, went back to the corporate world and quickly said, no, thank you. I was very intent on, God, if you think about, you only have a bit of time left, how do you give your kids everything you want them to have? And they were in grade school at the time. And so for me, I hearkened back to my happiest parts of childhood, which were birthdays and celebrations. And really, more so than, for me, they're not just events, they're ways to celebrate, they're excuses to celebrate the people we love.
Yeah, and I want to know, because to me, I'm real interested and fascinated by these little nudges from the universe. And I believe that your daughter was this little delivery messenger that, because, for the first time, and you probably had signs before, but you just didn't hear them, or you suppressed them. And so here she is, and it was the right message at the right time, I guess, because you received it. And I'd love to know, because I think people get these messages and they overlook them and they don't listen. And I'd love to know, after that fact, you said you went back to work and then you quit. Were you, clearly you didn't, like, people think it happens overnight. You didn't oh, I'm going to build this business about birthdays. Yeah. So did you, and I always tell people to stop being so busy and start getting quieter. And I imagine that once you left that busy job that kind of overtook your world, that the clarity started coming more clearly into your world. So did you start getting these more often downloads from once you kind of disengaged from your corporate job?
It's funny. And I don't think, until you mentioned it, I don't think I've thought about this. And I guess I left corporate, it was 6 or 7 years ago now. And while I had just gone back and I was kind of considering different assignments and meeting with different people, I heard a podcast. And again, this was, many, 6 or 7, like there weren't as many podcasts as there are now, or maybe it was an audio book. I don't remember what it was, but it was a woman speaking about how she and her husband had a business together and they had divorced, but they still stayed close friends. And so much so that she was the godmother of his child with another woman. I was like, whoa. And that for me, my husband and we tried for many years. And I say we spent the kids' inheritance on marriage counselors. But it was
good. I'm so glad to hear that, because I recommend that for everybody. We did too, but we still ended up apart. So,
and in that, hearing that woman, and that was the first I'd ever heard that you can still, even if you're not married, you can still have an amazing relationship with the person you made children with. And she and her husband were offering a writer's workshop. And while I was still employed, I signed up for a writer's workshop in Iowa. And I decided, and this was one of those, and I guess it was a sign from the universe because it was so unlike me, that I decided I was going to write a book. And I wanted this book to carry forth, whether for my kids or anyone else, the true joy of gift giving. And
chills. I just got chills. Talk about, that was a message from the universe. Yes.
And I can tell you right where I was standing when I was listening to that or whatever the audio was.
Yes.
And so the universe was calling me to Iowa, which the idea of, and it was a considerable amount of money. And looking at it, I don't even know if I hadn't left corporate America, I don't even know that I could have taken that much time off to go to the workshop. And that was, if you think back at the time, that's when gift cards were, certainly they were exploding. And I was seeing so many examples of people just like throwing gift cards at each other here, and I was in the local grocery store at the time, and this man, very handsome man in front of me, and he was a little bit older, and he had a card that happy 50th anniversary. Happy 50th. Thank you for 50 years of marriage for my beautiful wife. And he had milk and he had broccoli, and then he grabbed a gift card. And and there had been an issue. And so he and I had been chatting in line while we're waiting for the cashier. And I was like, oh my gosh, 50 years of marriage. And that's
got to be at least a gold or something, right? Yeah,
man. So
I don't know what it is at that level, but it's certainly more than a plastic gift card. But hey,
I
remembering it, right?
So with that, I ended up leaving corporate America. I went to that writer's workshop. I did, in fact, write a book, Wrap with Love, Meaningful Holiday Gift Giving with Less Stress and More Joy, because that holiday gift giving can be such a huge source of stress for people. And I knew this. I lived it. And so again, it harkens back to my mom. Her name is Irene. And I have so many memories of being a kid. We lived in a ranch house that was a little rectangle, maybe about 900 square feet. And I would stay up wrapping Christmas gifts on the floor because there wasn't enough room anywhere else. And she taught me how to wrap beautiful gifts with beautiful ribbons. And it was like, that's, I thought, how you did Christmas. But the problem I found by the time I was, in my 30s and 40s with kids, from a health perspective, I could no longer do what my mom did and stay up all night wrapping beautiful gifts. And it became harder and harder with birthdays and holidays as a dual career couple working mom to do the fun things when you're just struggling to, get dinner on the table and sign the permission slips and everything else. And so what that book was for me was a way of taking what I learned in corporate America, the problem solving. How do you stage things? It was a lot about the branding work I had done on how do you use that connection, whether it's giving a Christmas gift or in my case, working so that, people buying computers with Intel inside have that connection. And so what the book was marrying what I learned in corporate America, how to create a repeatable system that results in success in the biggest wow, with my love of gift giving and celebrations. And it was, I think at the time I wrote it, I had never written a book before. And you would have thought it was War and Peace in my mind. It was so big and huge. And it really wasn't. But
well, and those kind of things to me are almost like sometimes I'll write an article and I'll be like, oh, to me, it'll be like, I promised myself I do this article, this blog post or whatever, because I want it to be memorable and meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And then after it, I'm like, oh, you feel so good about the work once it's completed. So, because, it's value.
It was, and the book was a love letter, I think, to my mom and to my children. And those are the things that, 6 years later still mean the most for me. And so after writing the book and leaving the corporate world behind, there was the question of what do I do with this? And
and I want to say for a second, just for people who are listening, it's clear to me that podcast that you listened to, that episode, it was like this download that you heard, and it was like the seed germinated at that point. And it was just, like so many people think I'm going to have this instant idea and it's got to, and I haven't had that yet, but it's when you start to take the action that it unfolds. It's an unfolding. Somebody used that word the other day that I was interviewing, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's just the best word. Instead of saying, I don't know, say it's unfolding, because then that means you're open to more. And so the fact that you went and you did this and you did something you normally wouldn't have done and was like so out of character for you, and then it brought more. And like the standing in line with that, you still remember that was a turning point. That was part of your journey that was going to lead you. It's really an incredible story of how that transition happened from even the health crisis, which I think was an on purpose event that meant to take you away from where you weren't meant to be to lead you to where you were meant to be.
It's hindsight. It's so much easier.
Yes. Yes.
When I look back at corporate Lisa, was rewarded for her thinking. Post-corporate world entrepreneurial is more about feeling. And for me,
brain versus heart.
And that was a transition, and being open to listening to those signs. I was going to say took practice, and I would still say it takes practice. It doesn't end. And so for me, bridging what I spent 20 years in the corporate world doing, and like you, I was really proud of my work. I was proud of my team. Like there was so much greatness there. But how if the universe, you said it was a nudge, that health crisis was like a whack,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
with a sledgehammer. Hey,
Well,
kid.
that's what Oprah says. You'll get the whispers and the whispers until you get the slap in the face or the, whatever against the side of the head. And that's kind of what it was.
It was for me. And so that book became the beginning of how do I take the corporate skills I learned and apply them to something I'm passionate about. And what I ended up doing was finding my way. And that was trying things and failing is there are people who embrace failure and it's so exciting. And that's a piece that, again, I think I'm continuing to get better at. Having gone from the corporate world, I don't want to say it's paint by numbers, but if you are climbing the corporate ladder
Quickly,
yes, and you want to get to the next level, here's a career expanding assignment. You need to manage teams in other geography. Like it became, if you wanted, it's almost like a game on your phone where to continue advancing, you need to get these pieces. And so,
and you also usually have someone like your boss who's constantly like reassuring you and giving you accolades, and some companies give awards for good performance, and then you're working for yourself and you're like, good job, girl. You're the only person than your client's happiness that does matter. But yeah, it's hard.
It was, as you said, there are fewer landmarks, and how I measured success changed.
Yes.
And that became as I started doing speeches on, I would do courses on how I can turn anyone into a guaranteed great gift giver. And the workshops were I loved them because I could see that transformation from people going, oh my gosh, my wife hated the gift I gave her. She said, I'm never going to get it right. To seeing how, just with a bit of coaching really, and changing how people think about gift giving. And my advice to everyone on gift giving quickly, if somebody tells you what they want, get them what they want. Don't. That's one of the most common mistakes people make.
People give like I'll give my husband something that I want, but I know he needs, but it might not. Because some people have everything. It's like, and they buy whatever they want. He's like impossible. And in clothes, he wears clothes from college still. So how do you buy clothes for somebody who doesn't ever throw any clothes away?
That one is a challenge for sure. And as I was doing these gift workshops, what I realized is there was an opportunity for people who still want to do something amazing and kind and wonderful, but they need it to be easier, more convenient. They don't have the time. They may not have the vision. And so what I started doing was some more ready-made solutions for people. And I found that those ready-made solutions they scored on a couple of levels. One, a ready-made solution meant they had the parts that they needed, whether it was a gift or a party, but more importantly, it gave people confidence. It gave people confidence that it was going to be a home run, that the recipient was going to love it. And that's what started the company that I founded, Birthday Butler. They're all-in-one party solutions, and it allows people to celebrate at home, on the go, and it empowers people to really, spend time enjoying and celebrating the person, whether, it's their husband, sister, friend, whomever, because much like I saw with gift cards in the grocery store all those years ago when I think it was a Bed Bath & Beyond gift card that this guy, after 50 years of marriage, gave his wife, and it was $50. And I hope.
Oh, so the guy in the grocery store line, it was a Bed Bath & Beyond gift card? Or is this a
For
different? Oh
50
yeah,
bucks.
yeah. It's a Bed Bath and
But
Beyond. Well, they have everything there. They do really do. You can get anything at Bed Bath and Beyond.
they do, but much like that, in the gift space, in the party space, and it doesn't even have to be a big party. Even for at-home celebrations, what people are doing is scrolling Pinterest. Oh, I'm going to find the perfect thing. I'm going to find the perfect thing, or I'll go to Instagram. And you start out and you're really excited. I'm going to find the perfect things that I'm going to do for my husband's birthday next week. And then what happens typically is people gather all the ideas and they don't really think about the execution of it. And they end up running out of time and they end up feeling awful because they had all these great plans. And the reality, all their loved one wanted was to have their birthday celebrated. They didn't need the chandelier with the balloon arches. And so what was kind of the aha is how can, again, there are moments in our lives where there are giant parties are warranted. But the reality is for most of the birthdays of the people in our life, we're not going to do those big, giant, stay up all night making these gorgeous favors and decorations. But you still want your loved one to know that you love them, that this is their day and you are so excited. And so what these kits do is allow anyone to keep it on the shelf if they want, and you can unpack a party in just a few minutes. And we have different sizes, and the kind of the smaller party, it's like sending someone flowers or balloons, and you could set it up your dining room, your kitchen. There is a big centerpiece that says happy birthday, and reusable pieces so that it makes you or the person using the kit, you're the hero in this story. You're the one celebrating your loved one. And what we're finding by having these ready-made solutions, it takes some of the worry out of it, some of the I don't know what to do. And so we say it's a Pinterest-worthy party without the work.
No, I don't think my husband's birthday's coming up in November. I'm gonna have to order a little birthday celebrate because it's true. You like go to Michael's and you spend hours like finding and then things are in different aisles and then you're like, oh, it's just somebody who feels like they're in a time crunch doesn't have time for that. And then they don't end up not doing it and just getting
bingo. And so what I say is if you start with a good intention, you should end up with a great party or a great celebration. Yeah. And too often people head out and, we have all these illusions of what we're going to do. And that's awesome. But the moment you realize you don't have enough time, enough energy, the napkins don't match the plates, and then you're thinking the whole thing is ruined. And what you end up doing in those instances is kind of, and you think, oh, next time I'm not going to do this. I'm going to find an easier way.
Yeah, I have a question. What about like holidays in general? So like coming up, Halloween's a big deal sometimes some people really get into Halloween parties. My dad was born on Halloween, so we always had a big Halloween party. We have friends and they do big Halloween parties. It's not their birthday. They just love Halloween. So do you do like all kind of the holiday celebrations like Valentine's, Halloween, Easter, that kind of stuff?
What we've started doing is we've added banners. So the centerpieces can be used. We have a happy Halloween, a happy Thanksgiving, because what we found was people wanted easy. So easy is awesome in my book. And easy doesn't have to look cheap. It can still look lovely. And so it becomes an instant centerpiece. And it's something you can still do all the things, but it ensures you'll be feeling good. And when it comes to either parties or much like gifts, my advice is always spend some time thinking about what your priorities are. So it sounds like for your father, like Halloween was it. That was the big deal. And so that probably means you're not going to make a gigantic fuss over Thanksgiving or Christmas. And so prioritize whether it's the holiday or the birthday, which are the ones that are going to be giant blowout bash it, like this is what we're known for, and which ones are going to be smaller. Because all too often we think we always, especially on the home front when it comes to entertaining, we always overestimate how much we can get done. And I always encourage people to map out, if you could only do, let's say for your husband's birthday in November. So you'll get him a gift and maybe you'll have some sort of celebration. If you could only do 3 things for that celebration, what would those 3 things be and how much time would it take you?
Yeah,
and
break it
you
down.
may say, oh my gosh, I have to make his favorite birthday cake because he loves my German chocolate cake. Okay, then that's one of your big 3 things, and figure out how much time it's going to be. You may decide he likes a romantic dinner. So, okay, I'm going to cook him about whatever those things are. Actually think about how much time they take. And so you know that those 3 things, that German chocolate cake, that romantic dinner, and he wants his favorite music on. You know those are the 3 things you must find the time to do. Start with what's most important, and then you can go on Pinterest and start scrolling for all the other things.
Yeah.
And by focusing on what's most important, it actually is so much more calming. It is much more intentional, and you're much more confident that they'll love what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. So we'll put up the website so people can, check out what you offer, because I think you have a large and small different sizes for party packages. And in parting, one of the things that I would like you to share, just your last thoughts on how because what I see is a lot of people when they get to be our age and they've had other jobs and other careers, they dismiss what they know. They think, well, I don't know enough to do that. I did the same, but we have so much. And then what I ended up creating was actually pulling from so much of my knowledge and skills that I developed in the corporate world. Even though I didn't put those dots together initially, it was kind of, again, this, as I started to walk that path that I was more sparked and lit up about, these ideas started coming to me, and I started, oh, I do know that. And oh, I do know that. And I could make this into something. So, and it sounded like early on with your book, you did take your skills and knowledge and turned it and saw this kind of connection. So did that come pretty quickly and easily to you? And what advice would you have for somebody who's like kind of not seeing the connection, and to kind of assure them that there is one?
The way I would describe it is, I think it is a shift in identity. So I used to be corporate Lisa who traveled around the world doing product launches and branding. But if I, at the time, instead of describing myself that way, if I had said I was Lisa, an awesome problem solver who loves big challenges, who is energized by working with and leading groups of people, again, it's the same person, but when I called it corporate Lisa and then I left, I didn't have an identity. If I had said I was problem solver Lisa who loved working with people, those things would have all been true. And if I had defined my identity that way, it would have been a much smoother transition, I think, out of the corporate world. Because Lisa's been a problem solver her whole life, right?
You know, that's so good. That's such high value. That's such a high value message for our listeners, because I think that's part of the human need, is to have an identity. You know, it's our ego. And what you did is you checked into the soul and what the real authentic Lisa inside, after you uncover and peel back that layer of identity. So powerful. Thank you so much. And I am going to check out your website for my husband's birthday. So, because I'm not big into gift stuff. So I like the words of affirmation. That's my love language. But anyways, he's pretty easy. I like experiences. So I try to do things that, you know, just make experiences, like go away and for a weekend or something. But it's kind of hard to do in this COVID world we live in right now. But thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your gifts and your wisdom. It's been amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Be well and stay healthy.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Not Your Average Lives podcast. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe on iTunes if you have an Apple device. You can find free resources and learn what else I have going on at the moment that might interest you on my website at notyouraveragegrandma.com. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook at Not Your Average Grandma. If you liked this episode, it would make my heart so happy if you could leave me a 5-star rating. You can also add a review to let me know what you like about this podcast, which will help spread the word about it to others who need a little midlife inspiration. As always, be you, listen to your inner voice, and focus on reigniting that lost spark so you can start living your own Not Your Average life.